Okay, so the last thing we're going to cover in this unit is the average value of a function. So average value of a function just simply is something that we've covered before. If you'll look in your note packet, it is basically the mean value theorem. Okay, we talked about this. Of course, this is in the new little packets that y'all like, but it's basically the mean value theorem, and it just says here in your note packet, like your actual real note packet, that f average is equal to 1 over b minus a times the integral of the function over that interval. Okay, so again, because I know you prefer these little packets, the mean value theorem says that if f is continuous on the closed interval a to b, so it has to be continuous through the endpoints, and it's differentiable on the open interval, which means it doesn't have to be differentiable on the endpoints, then there has to exist a number c such that the derivative of the function at c is equal to the slope at the endpoints. So remember we talked about this, like you have a point here. Oh, stupid pen. You have a point. Let's change color. So let's say you have, come on, this thing hates me, B. Okay, so you have this secant line. So this is what we talked about before. So this is the secant line, and it's the average, right? The average of the function, because we know that the slope changes throughout. We have decreasing slope, increasing slope. We have a zero slope at the minimum, but we have that average from endpoint to endpoint. So remember, this is what we talked about, like if you're driving to Tupelo. So you can get your average miles per hour. So you drive 60 miles in 60 minutes, you're averaging 60 miles per hour. But if you're leaving from Amory and going to Tupelo, you're not driving 60 miles an hour the entire time, right? You're going through town, you're going through red lights, you're going through traffic, different stuff that you pick up speed and slow down. You're on the 4 lane where you're driving 70, you're on 2 lane where you're driving 45, or through town where you're driving 45. So you have these increasing and decreasing, but at some point you were above the average, some point you were below the average, which obviously gives you the average, right? So all they're saying is that there has to exist a point somewhere where at that tangent point C, that the slope is equal to the average, right? That's all that says, okay? So mean that value for integrals just says that f of c, which is equal to f average, is equal to 1 over b minus a times the integral, right? This is the same thing, it's just written differently. They multiplied both sides. Like if this was not here, they multiplied both sides by b minus a, right? b minus a, and they got this. It's the same thing, okay? Well, I guess technically this was not here, right? Okay, so they multiply both sides by b minus a, and they get this formula, okay? So it's the same thing, just restated, okay? So it says, find the average value of the function on the interval from 1 to 3, so g average. Let me write in black. So g average is equal to 1 over b minus a, the integral from a to b of g of t, dt, right? So 1 over b minus a, so 3 minus 1, the integral from 1 to 3 of the function t over square root of 3 plus t squared dt. Okay, so we have 1/2 integral. So I'm going to have to use u sub here. There's no way for me to take this integral. There's no way for me to distribute this, rewrite it. It is what it is. Okay, so I'm going to let u, as you usually would, be what's under the radical, which is also has the higher power. So 3 plus t squared, which gives me that du has to be 2t dt. So the first thing is, if I'm going to have to add in a 2 here, then I have to take out a 2 on this side. So I have 2t square root of 3 plus t squared dt. 1 to 3. So I have 1/4, 1 to 3, 2t, square root of 3 plus t squared dt. So now I'm ready to make my u sub. The problem here is, remember when we do u sub, you can't use the same bounds because 1 to 3 is in terms of t. And if we're going to be in terms of u, then we have to find our u bounds. So when t is 1, u would be 3 plus 1 squared. So u would be 4. When t is 3, my upper bound, u is 3 plus 3 squared, which is 12. So I have then 1/4 integral from 4 to 12. And my u is here, so this would be u to the 1/2. 2t dt is du. And I'm ready to take my integral at this point. It should be negative 1/2. Sorry. Moved it from the bottom to the top, right? So I have 1/4. So add 1 to the 1/2 divided by 1/2, evaluated from 4 to 12. So multiply by the reciprocal, that's 2 over 1. So this would be 1/2. U to the 1/2, 4 to 12. So 1/2 times 12 to the 1/2 minus 4 to the 1/2. So 1/2. So 12 has, this is 1/2 is the same thing as square root. So 12 has a perfect square of 4. So this would be 2 square root of 3. And then the square root of 4 is 2. So you have the square root of 3 minus 1. Okay. So we say find the average value over the interval 0 to pi. I know trig functions are your most favorite. Okay. So we have h average is equal to 1 over b minus a, so pi minus 0 from 0 to pi of cosine to the 4th x sine x dx. So again, going to have to use u sub because cosine has my power. That's what I'm going to use. So then du would be negative sine x dx. So remember, if I'm going to have to add a negative in, I have to add a negative on the outside. Also, remember, when I change this to u, I'm going to have to change my bounds. So when x is 0, u is cosine of 0, which is 1. When x is pi, u is cosine of pi, which is negative 1. So we have then negative 1 over pi so when 0 is 1 and when pi is negative 1, so don't switch those to put them in numeric order. We can put them in numeric order, and I'm going to do that in just a second, but you have to make sure you put them in the right place. When x is 0, u is 1. When x is pi, u is a negative 1. So you have u to the 4th du. Now, you don't have to fix this, but it probably will make you feel better to fix it. So remember, we can flip the bounds if we multiply by a negative. So that's going to make this a positive 1 over pi. And then I can put my bounds in numeric order, which will likely make you feel better. So then I have 1 over pi times u to the 5th over 5, evaluated from negative 1 to 1. So I'm going to bring my 5 out just to make my life a little bit easier. So I have 1 to the 5th minus negative 1 to the 5th. So a negative to the 5th is a negative, and two negatives make a positive. So that would be 1 plus 1, which gives me 2 over 5 pi. Okay, so this is a little bit different question. It says find the average value of the function on the interval, and then find the value of c so that f average is equal to f of c. So we're going to do exactly what we did in the first part, first two, find the average value, and then we're going to find f of c. Okay, so we have f average is equal to 1 over b minus a in the integral a to b of f of x dx. So I have 1 over 3 from 2 to 5. I'm not going to use u sub. I'm just going to expand this out. So remember, square the first term, twice the product, square the last term. Now I can take the integral. So I have 1/3 x cubed over 3. So this is going to be squared, so divide by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3x squared plus 9x evaluated from 2 to 5. So I have 1/3 5 cubed over 3 minus 3 times 5 squared plus 9 times 5. Of course, they couldn't give us a 0. 2 cubed over 3 minus 3 times 2 squared plus 9 times 2. So I have 1/3. 3 cubed is 125 over 3. 5 squared is 25 times 3 is negative 75. 9 times 5 is positive 45. 2 cubed is 8, negative 8 over 3, distributing my negative to each term. 2 squared is 4 times 3, negative 3 is negative 12 times a negative is positive 12. And 9 times 2 is 18 times a negative is negative 18. So I have 1/3. So 125 minus 8 is 117 over 3. 75, negative 75 and positive 45 is negative 30 plus 12 minus 18, negative 36, right? Negative 6, negative 30, negative 36, yes. So I have 7, 8, 9. That's divisible by 3. So 3 would be 9, 27, 37, minus 36. 39 minus 36, which gives me 1/3 times 3, which conveniently is 1. So all of that work for 1. It's lovely when you do all of that work for a 1 or a 0. Fantastic, right? Okay, so then we're looking for where f of c is equal to f average. And I know they write AVE. It doesn't matter. Some write AVE, some write AVG. Just a habit, AVG for me. So f of c would be c minus 3 squared is equal to f average, and f average is 1. So square root both sides. We get c minus 3 is equal to plus or minus 1. So c is equal to 3 plus or minus 1. So c is equal to 4, or c is equal to 2. 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. Easy enough. Yes? Okay, remember, if I move through too fast, just pause the video so that you can copy the notes. Find the numbers b such that the average value of that function on the interval 0 to b is 3. So this is kind of the same thing. It's not kind of, it is the same thing. They just give us different parts of the puzzle. Okay, so let's fill in with what we know. Okay, so f average is equal to 1 minus b minus a from a to b of f of x dx, right? That's the formula. So let's fill in what we know. Okay, so once it says that, find the number b such that the average value of the function, blah, 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 on the interval 0 to b is 3. So that tells me that f average is 3. B minus a is 0. tells me 0 to b. On the integral 0 to b of the function 2 plus 6x minus 3x squared dx, right? So I have 3 is equal to 1 over b times, I can take the antiderivative of this, 2x, so this is going to be squared. So 3x squared, 6 divided by 2, minus 3x cubed divided by 3 is just going to be x cubed, evaluated from 0 to b. So 3 is still equal to 1 over b times 2b plus 3b squared minus b cubed, all of that minus, when you sub in 0, you get 0. So I have 3 is equal to, I'm going to distribute my 1 over b to drop it down, this is cubed, to drop it down to something I'm a little bit more familiar with. So 1 over b times 2b is 2 plus 3b minus b squared. So it doesn't really matter whether you want to use factoring, quadratic formula, or whatever. You got to get everything on the same side. Personal pet peeve is that I want my b squared to be positive, so I'm going to move everything to make my b squared positive. So I have b squared minus 3b, and then you subtract 2, will be 1. This obviously does not factor. So we have x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root. Well, I guess technically we're looking for b, so b is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I have 9 minus 4 over 2. So b is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. And that's it. Okay, you have some daily grades to work on to practice F average. These are the only 3 scenarios where you're just finding F average, where you have to find, in the previous problem, the value of C. And then this one, they love this problem. They love to just kind of sneak it in on the very last part of the test, the finding B. Okay, but just remember, it's the same formula. It's just a different missing piece. Okay.